This week and in this upcoming lunar cycle that starts with the Aries new moon on the 17th, you may be feeling a lot of extra energy, mostly in the form of restlessness, but it could also be a lot more emotion, particularly anger, frustration, agitation, either in yourself or in others. And don't worry, there's nothing wrong with you. We are just all experiencing a download of huge amounts of energy, and it is shaking everything up. So welcome back to Yin-Tuition. I am Ann Whitmer. I am a longtime Yin yoga teacher and intuitive spiritual guide. And each month I do an energy reading of the lunar cycle, which begins with one new moon and finishes the day before the next new moon. Before we get to my intuitive reading, I just wanted to say something about the astrology, because what's happening right now is really unprecedented. We have a stellium of 8 planets, planetary bodies, in the sign of Aries, and you may experience this as something in you really ready to rise and to expand and to launch something big. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, so it represents the pioneer as well as the warrior. It is ruled by Mars, god of war. It also represents new beginnings, new cycles, sometimes impulsive action. And this week particular, the energy is just on steroids. It's pushing things to begin and to accelerate things that we've been waiting to start. Now is the time. It's also going to make any form of stagnation really uncomfortable. So this energy comes in typically as restlessness, the need to do something, and it can be a little rash and impulsive, possibly even destructive. How you will experience this has a lot to do with where you are personally in your life, where you are in terms of personal development, but also your nervous system and how regulated or dysregulated it is. This is not something to suppress. This is energy to work with. When this energy is acknowledged and integrated, it can lead to bold and decisive aligned action, and really a sense of reconnecting with your soul's purpose and your true soul's path. It could even be a whole identity shift. But if you are dysregulated, this energy could lead to conflict and impulsive rash action, or you may experience it as the tendency is to shut down, to go back into our old coping mechanisms, maybe even the opposite, procrastination, avoidance, just wanting to crawl in bed. And because this energy has a sense of urgency, you might feel like you should be further along with something, a project or life itself, or feeling this unmet need to choose a direction, even if you're not quite sure what that is right now. So there could be this real feeling of pressure building. And in this month's practice video, I'll show you ways to integrate this energy and work with it in a more embodied way so that you can really make the most of it. Let's get into the intuitive reading. Each month, I sit down and I just sense into what the energy of this upcoming cycle feels like and how it will affect us on a collective level as well as on an individual level. When I sat down to do this reading, I experienced something unusual. I actually experienced what is called clairgustance, which is psychic taste. It's when you have a very distinctive taste in your mouth without any food or without any, other stimulation. And that actual taste or texture was of marshmallow. And I had to be honest, I am not a huge marshmallow fan. And I just felt that, how there's that kind of dusty coating on the outer edge of a marshmallow. I'm like, oh, this is so odd. And while I'm doing that, I had this image of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I think that's his name, from Ghostbusters. And, he was just huge, walking around a city and he was just knocking over buildings. I think this has a lot to do with what's going on in America and with a particular situation in the Middle East, and a leader we have who's being reckless and doesn't have real clear vision of even what the purpose is of this. So it was just this kind of aimless knocking things down. But what I think is significant about the marshmallow is it's just fluff. It really is nothing. There's no substance. And I think that's something to keep in mind as we continue with what else I got. So I had that little experience, and then I got a very clear image of a tarot card. I wasn't actually using cards, but the image just came into my mind, and it was the 10 of Swords from the classic Rider-Waite deck. And in that image, it's mostly black, and you see a soldier with 10 swords in his back. It's a representation of an ending. But what's also evident in that image is all this yellow and gold above, and it really representing transformation. That although there is an ending, what I really saw in my image was the color of the yellow, which is the idea of hope, of new things beginning. So I am very hopeful about that. When I sat down the second time, I got another image, and it looked like a gold ball, and then I realized, oh, it's actually like the knob that goes on top of a brass bed. And then I clearly saw a full image of a bed, a brass bed, and suddenly came this memory of a less known Disney film called Bedknobs and Broomsticks. And then I kept thinking, what happens in there? I didn't really remember, because I was about 4, I think, when I saw it. But I remember this king who was a lion. There was animated animals personified, and there was this king, this lion. So I went to go look up the plot, and the plot takes place in London during the Blitz in World War II. There's even Nazis, I guess, in this movie, which I have no memory of. I just remember that they had this magic bed. The main adult character was taking care of some kids who'd been abandoned or stranded during the Blitz, and they somehow use this magical bed to go off to this magical island. And on this island is this king, King Leonidas. And what is just phenomenal is when I looked up, because this was what stood out, this king particularly. And when I looked up about his character, this is straight off the internet, Leonidas, he is egotistical and obsessed with his own image. He's very competitive. He cheats to make sure he wins. He has an explosive, thin-skinned temperament and often roars with rage and bullies others. He doesn't allow any outsiders onto the island, but he agrees to meet the humans after they offer him something he values. Again, who does that sound like? So then, of course, we need to know what happens to Leonidas, and this is what it says. Leonidas wears this medallion. It's called the Star of Astaroth, and it contains the magical words that Miss Price, the adult, needs for some kind of spell they're doing, I think, to get rid of the Nazis. Professor Brown tricks him with a gypsy switch, replacing the medallion with a referee's whistle. Leonidas pursues the group in a blind fury. He is eventually defeated when Miss Price uses a spell to transform him into a rabbit. So, this character, which again sounds like someone we are quite familiar with today, they were showing me this movie for some reason, and particularly this image of this king being defeated, being turned into a rabbit, going from a lion to a rabbit. And perhaps that metal represents something that will be of value to us from this whole very frustrating experience. So that was a feeling on the collective level. A lot of that, it fits very well with this Aries energy, this kind of destructive, domineering, selfish, egotistical. So just watch for that type of energy and events playing out over the next month or so. On the personal level, what I saw was the moon landing. And then I clearly heard the famous lines, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And I think this has several layers of meanings. First of all, this is an exciting time. And everything, whether you follow astrology or not, there is this momentum that has been building. And if you have had this dream or this project, or just this sense that there's something more for you to do here on this life, that there's a real purpose that maybe you haven't completely fulfilled yet, this is the time to do it. I think our actions have the potential to be really profound, that we could do our own version of a moon landing. So that's the first layer. The second layer is how this energy could also play out. And particularly if you get overwhelmed by lots of fast-moving energy, you may shut down and maybe drift back into procrastination or just lack of motivation. Sometimes all you need to do is take one step. And I know that's easier said than done, but we can overwhelm ourselves, particularly when we're really wanting to do something big or start something big and we haven't yet. So trying to pare the goal, the project down in ways that are manageable and taking any step. If you're really stuck, even just writing down some thoughts each day, maybe calling someone and sharing it. The more you verbalize an idea, the more it becomes concrete. So don't be afraid if you're feeling like you just can't get going. One small step could end up being a giant leap. I think the final message of that image and the quote specifically is about the impact that we can actually have on the world through our individual actions. And I know when things are so overwhelming, you feel like, well, what can I do? But even the act of bringing yourself into more balance and into a state of more consistent peace is a huge gift to give to the world. Certainly a gift to give to those around you, but that will impact who they interact with. It's just a giant ripple. And our interior states really have an effect on the collective energy around us. I think too, if you're doing action out in the world, anything you do to make this world a better, more peaceful, more just place is incredibly powerful. And it always reminds me of what Margaret Mead said famously, is never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So hold that in your heart, because it is such an important message when you're feeling like, what should I do? So later I heard a song, an 80s song, so we moved up from the 60s and 70s to the 80s, a song called Rise, which was by Public Image Limited, which is Johnny Rotten's band after the Sex Pistols. And there's not a lot of lyrics in Rise, but what really stood out for me and the part that I heard in my mind was, I'm not kidding, anger is an energy. And he repeats it over and over again. Anger is an energy. Anger is an energy. Yes, anger is an energy. And energy is just energy. It's what we do with it. Anger, when it comes out sideways, can really hurt other people and ultimately hurt ourselves because it impacts your relationships. But anger can also be a very powerful motivator. It can help you be very clear about your boundaries, where they lie, and what is important not to cross. And anger can be used as fuel in a constructive way to work with what the Buddhists call fierce compassion. And that's really standing up and doing what you can to lessen suffering, lessen injustice, and being clear of what is not acceptable and doing what you can to alleviate it. The key with fierce compassion is the action is always connected to love, to the love of humanity and the love of wanting people to not experience suffering. So another big month, important things to think about. Like I said, I will have a practice for this month as well. We'll talk about embodying this energy and working with it, as well as shaking out either some of that potential anger or lethargy. So look for that soon. So nice to see you. Take care.